think that Bitcoin has a ton of upside, and it's going to be the realization that people need the safe havens, that the government is still going to want to stimulate, which is going to be inflationary because the politicians want to get reelected every 4 years.
Right.
But the Fed maybe can't do what they were doing in terms of printing us out of this recession. So we get stuck in this kind of longer term recession. Inflation kind of holds around 4% for many, many years.
In today's video, Chief Market Strategist of InTheMoneyStocks.com Gareth Soloway tells us all about his latest analysis of the charts as well as his predictions and price targets for Bitcoin. According to Soloway, Bitcoin may face a lot of uncertainties in the near term as a result of the ongoing global economic declines, and we can still possibly see the Bitcoin price drop to 12K even lower, before putting it at a bottom. Soloway shares his opinion regarding high inflation rates, the stock market, the crypto market, and the Fed. Before listening to him, please ensure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's dive into his last interview now.
What is your current sentiment around where the potential of the S&P and some of the major stocks that really could kind of fly into the face of what's happening here on the FOMC meeting on Wednesday?
Yeah, so I think that right now the market has been pricing in that 75 basis point rate hike. And I think that's why we saw that volatility. Initially, the markets were kind of around that 50 basis points. Then we saw the CPI data last week, and the market really reacted and said, oh boy, now it's definitely 75. So that's what the market's pricing in right now. I think what the important thing to recognize is that 75 is what the market's pricing in, but what the market will move on Wednesday is going to be what the Fed guides going forward. Are they going to say, okay, we're going to stay the course and raise another 75 at the next meeting? Or are they going to say, hey, we might be a little bit more dovish here. Maybe we're going to start to wait and see what the outcome economically is going to be.
How far do you think the stock market can take in terms of more cuts? Where do you think we're going to see it toward the end of the year?
Yeah, so I do think there's a little bit more downside, but with the downside comes amazing opportunity for swing traders, for kind of shorter term position traders. And so one thing I'd love to show is the chart here of Meta. And one of the levels I've isolated down, there's a huge support level around this 133, 132, and all the way up to about 135. And you can see, again, pivot point here, pivot point right here, all the way back here. So as you see, Meta's had this massive decline. Number one, that gets my attention. I say, okay, Meta may be on sale. Maybe the kind of the emotion is getting too crazy on it. And then I look for those technical levels. So I think the point being here is that, again, who knows where we are December 31st, but if in the next 2 weeks we were to slam into this level on Meta, I would absolutely be saying, pick some up, buy a little bit, maybe not a ton, but just dip the toe in the water. And I think there's a lot of tech stocks like this out there that have just been crushed. I mean, your list was very accurate. I mean, AMD, NVIDIA, I mean, all of these type names. In fact, let me go to NVIDIA here real quick and look at NVIDIA's level. It's not that far away from epic support where this consolidation sideways action was going. That's going to be huge support at $120. So it's maybe a little bit more downside. And then I think you start to see some really interesting opportunities into kind of maybe the October, November period.
I'm kind of curious, your thought on Twitter right now, down 4%. And what we've been seeing is a lot of pressure from media really pushing back on Twitter, TikTok, etc. Do you think we see some more pain on the Twitter front?
Yeah, so I think with Twitter, the real key is going to be how does this Elon Musk fiasco all trade out, right? I mean, I think that's where we are now. Just looking at the chart alone and kind of ignoring the nonsense out there, one of the things that strikes me is a trend line here. I mean, look at this trend line sloping down. So if you're someone who wants to be bullish on Twitter, you need to see a break of this trend line, because what you'll see here is every time it hits the trend line, it gets pounded to the downside.
Right.
And then it goes back and pounded again. So until that breaks, be very careful. But if it does break, then you have a trend line break, a trend break, and you actually could see some upside. And just to talk briefly about NVIDIA, and we talked about Meta before, you notice how as these stocks come into these levels, these technical levels, it's almost a trigger that could tell us that we could be looking at that coinciding with a Fed pivot. And so again, that's not telling us when that's going to happen, but when those levels hit, Why would technology bounce, guys? Ask yourself that question. Why would tech have a big bounce? The answer is the dollar would have to be coming in, interest rates would be coming in. How would that happen? Fed pivot.
And when you see where Bitcoin is right now, give me your thoughts on how the FOMC meeting on Wednesday plays out, what the forward-looking statements might really kind of go to, where you think that's going to slide. What are your thoughts right now? Do you feel like it's going to be the 75?
I do. I mean, I would be so shocked if it was 100. The Fed has been notorious for kind of guiding the market, and the market is telling us 75 is the likely outcome. In addition, I think one of the things that people are forgetting here is that the Fed has started QT in September, which is essentially another way that they're tightening. So even if they do 75 basis points with QT added into it, it's very much the equivalent of 100 basis points. So I think, again, the Fed at most is doing 75. I think they have to be so careful here because if they, I mean, think about this. The rate hikes that we've seen already in this one, there's a delayed reaction in the economy. And what happens in 3 or 4 months from now when all of a sudden the economy comes crashing down? How does the Fed backtrack? So I think, again, 100 to me is off the table because of QT being in the mix too.
What are your thoughts on, do you feel like this is going to be kind of, a dine and dash type recession where we get a short-term period, or is this something that you feel like is going to be a little bit more long-term?
I'm in the longer term camp, and I think last time I was on it, we talked a little bit about the potential that we could actually see the market go sideways for 10 years, much like the .com collapse did until the NASDAQ took out its highs. And I think that's important to think about because if you look at how has the market gotten out of every big drop in the last 10, 12, 15 years, and the answer is the Fed has printed us out. Well, now you take a situation where inflation, let's say, is at 4% or 5% in the next year. How does the Fed print us out of that? And I think I'd liken people to take a look at the Hang Seng chart, the Brazilian stock market chart. They had these massive runs around 2006, 2007, and those charts have gone sideways since then, and they have never taken out those highs. And I think that could be what we're looking at, mainly because, again, the Fed, by printing so much money, pulled forward a lot of that upside growth, and now we have to kind of pay for it by this longer consolidation digestion.
Do you think the 2% target is reality, though? Or there's many people I talk to, they still feel that a 2% inflation is just not reality based on the world economic condition as it is today?
Yeah, I'm not in the camp that it's very realistic, at least not for a few years. And I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is that the wage pressures. So we've seen oil come down. We've seen a lot of commodities come crashing down. But the one thing that's not coming down is the rising wages. And maybe they're not going to continue to go up. But we've seen from this latest CPI is that even though oil had fallen a lot, it didn't get passed on to the consumer. And I would just remind people to think about, if you're paying your employees double, let's say from $15 to $30 or 20 to 40, you can't raise your product by double to compensate for that. So what you do is you raise it by 10% this year, 10% next year, and you kind of takes some time to pass that hike along to the consumer. And I think that's going to make this inflation stickier around the 3, 4, 5% range for literally 4 to 5 years before it kind of fully gets digested into the system.
How will this play out for Bitcoin if it fully decouples away from the traditional markets in this period of time, which could be a little bit of a flat or downturn in the overall financial markets? How do you think this plays out?
Yeah, so I think it's very positive for Bitcoin. And that's kind of one of the things I'm watching for of when that turn in the tide occurs for crypto overall, is when we get into this scenario where inflation stays sticky higher, but the Fed can't kind of be printing us out of that mess. So I think that's where you're looking for that pivot point. I think it probably doesn't come till 2023 at some point, but that would be huge to me. And again, I think that Bitcoin has a ton of upside, and it's going to be the realization that people need the safe havens, that the government is still going to want to stimulate, which is going to be inflationary because the politicians want to get reelected every 4 years. Right. But the Fed maybe can't do what they were doing in terms of printing us out of this recession. So we get stuck in this kind of longer term recession. Inflation kind of holds around 4% for many, many years. And people say, okay, well, where can I put my money? Gold maybe, and also Bitcoin and some of the cryptos.
I want to jump to your tweet here, and then if you can kind of show me this on your chart. It says, Great Merge Classic Sell the News event. Watching the keys at 19.5 level on Bitcoin is never confirmed below. Once it does, small support at around 17.5, and if that breaks, 12 to 13. Let's talk about that quickly on your charts, because I think this is something you are kind of painting out. Show me how this happens of where we could see Bitcoin in the 12 to 13, which we've talked about here on the show quite often, as this could be the new zone of purchase.
Yeah, so the big thing to recognize on Bitcoin here is that you basically have been hovering just above or just below the 2017 high. So I'm going to bring up a trend line here, and we're going to go all the way back to those 2017 highs and put in this line here. And you can see that the market has just been hammering on this over and over again since June, so many times. Now the kicker is, and you can see Bitcoin's actually come back amazingly well today, but what we saw yesterday was a close below, and what you look for here is a secondary close below the low of the first candle that closed below. And I know that sounds complex, but basically what needs to happen here is you're looking to see, does Bitcoin today close below the low of yesterday? If so, that's what we call confirmation of a breakdown. Now, if you look here, never happened. If we go over here, never happened, never happened, never happened. So for me, it's the difference maker between a confirmation signal telling us that it's a real breakdown versus a lot of games that algos play to stop people out. So you'll see a close below a level because then shorts pile on board and then people stop out of their long positions, and then the institutional algos rip it the other way. Once you confirm, that very rarely occurs. So I'm watching this like a hawk. Basically, do we close today above or below 19,400? And right now it looks like a game time decision. So first level would be that 17.5 level from June, but that at this stage is only going to be somewhat on the minor side. And then I think you do see a continued down move to that 12 to 13,000 level. 12 to 13,000 will be very big support though. But again, it's interesting because you were mentioning sentiment continues to get more and more negative. When I hear that, it almost makes me think contrarian. I'm a big contrarian. So it makes me wonder if, the negativity out there actually could create at least a short-term bounce before we flush down.
What are your thoughts of where Ethereum is standing right now?
Yeah, so Ethereum, we did see that kind of sell off after the merge right here. It has come down, but it's, in all fairness, it's still holding one of my key levels that I'm following, this 1250 level. And again, you got very, very close to it in the overnight before we reversed now. So basically, I would be looking for that level to hold. If that holds, you could see Ethereum start to push up. Here's a beautiful trend line where it's going to be. If we push up, you'll see resistance right there. If it gets through that, then you could be looking at the 200 moving average, which is basically right around this double top right here. I'm in the camp where you might bounce back to this trend line, but I do still think there's more downside to go in the near term or over the next couple weeks, at least retesting the double bottom here. So in a weird way, and maybe this is from my stock background, but I'm not that worried about it. In fact, I actually kind of want it just to get it done with. Gary Gensler, get your butt in here, give us these rules, and let Ethereum figure it out. Because again, if we all want Bitcoin to hit up to $500,000 or $1 million, the only way that's happening, you could say, I want so many people to adopt it around the world. Fine, but when you only have $10,000 or $1,000 in some of these other countries, it's going to be hard to drive Bitcoin or Ethereum up to crazy levels. What do you need? You need big institutional money. And big institutional money is not touching these things with a 10-foot pole until they figure out the rules. And think about what a security is. A security reports earnings, okay, but they have to file reporting. They have to abide by strict regulations. They can't do shady things. They get in trouble for that. Is it really that bad? Maybe it is, but at least it gives you clarity. And I think that's so important. So if Ethereum is a security, tell us. Let them figure it out. Let them file the proper paperwork, and then let's freaking buy it and watch it run up, because it's going to go when that happens.